may recall that in 2016, many of the ideas that I talked about, Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, making public colleges and universities tuition free, all of those ideas, people will say, oh, Bernie, they're so radical, they are extreme. The American people just won't accept those ideas. Well, you know what's happened in over 3 years? All of those ideas and many more are now part of the political mainstream.
As Senator Bernie Sanders noted himself, the progressive agenda that defined his last campaign no longer sets him apart in the crowded race for the White House. Here are just a few examples. Senator Kamala Harris wants to establish a middle-class tax cut. Senator Elizabeth Warren is proposing a universal child care plan. And Senator Cory Booker is co-sponsoring the Green New Deal. These Democratic contenders are endorsing proposals that got Sanders called a radical during the 2016 election. To discuss all this, let's bring in Democratic strategist and CBS political contributor Antoine Seawright. He is the CEO of Blueprint Strategy. Then Adam Green is in our Washington bureau. He's the co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee. And here with me in New York is CBS political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. Welcome to all of you. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. Adam, let's start with you. More lawmakers are championing these progressive ideals than ever before. But is this all a lot of lip service, or is the balance of power actually shifting on the left?
It could be both. But it's a huge progressive victory that the center of gravity in the Democratic Party has shifted in a more populist direction, and the ideas that were fringe before are now considered mainstream. That being said, look, checking a box on an issue or just endorsing or co-sponsoring an issue is not the same as leading on that issue or prioritizing it. So what we'll see in this campaign is a question of who is leading on what issues. And I think one question that many voters will ask is, do I understand a candidate's worldview enough to know where they will land on future unanticipated issues, the next Wall Street collapse? And that's where people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren will probably stand out from the pack.
Okay, so Antoine, does a Democrat need to fully embrace a progressive agenda in order to clinch this nomination?
Absolutely not. You're going to see a mixed bag of policy agendas in the Democratic Party upcoming primary, and that's the beauty about our party. We are a big tent party, and the primary process allows the marketplace of ideas to be put forth, challenged, and even to be debated. And so I don't think you have to be, quote unquote, a progressive or moderate or whatever you need to be on the policy standpoint. But I will say this, most of the things you see candidates talking about are what I call 50,000-foot thoughts or 50,000-foot suggestions about how we need to improve some of the problems we have in this country, whether it's the New Deal, whether it's Medicare, whether it's health care, whatever it is. I think that is just a framework that you see candidates work from. I think the next step and what's important to look forward to is how they drill down and how they actually flush out individually what that looks like for them, because I think for each candidate it's going to look different. And make no mistake, you have some what people call pragmatic, moderate voices running in the Democratic primary, like Amy Klobuchar. If Joe Biden gets in, I suspect he will come from that place. And so you're going to see a mixed bag. I just don't think you have to be one way or another in order to be successful.
It's interesting. We saw populism of the right elect President Trump in 2016. Caitlin, are we now about to see populism of the left? Is that what you're seeing here? And also, you've been talking to voters. Do they feel they need a candidate on the Democratic side to be progressive?
Well, first of all, voters on the Democratic side at the primary level going to these events that I've been following at candidate events are just really excited to start being engaged in the process. So they definitely want someone who can defeat Donald Trump, but the question is what that candidate looks like. And for some, it's on policy. For others, it's on rhetoric. And even for others still, it's more about who they just personally identify with or gravitate towards. But I think kind of overall, you're seeing this pitch of economic populism in all of these campaigns, really kind of in this idea of economic fairness and speaking to issues of economic inequality. So you're seeing candidates at various different levels on various various parts of the party spectrum talk about an economy that doesn't work for everybody, an economy that works only for those at the top, as they say, and an economy that doesn't really address people's personal concerns regarding health care, especially child care. You're going to hear a lot about. Elizabeth Warren, for example, announced a plan, and just this idea of kind of the middle class isn't what it used to be, and it could be the gap should be shrinking. So all of these themes are certainly at the forefront of the Democratic primary right now.
All in play. Now, I want to play some more of what Sanders told CBS this morning. John Dickerson asked him what's going to be different this time around from his 2016 campaign, and here's what he said.
We're going to win. We are going to also launch what I think is unprecedented in modern American history, and that is a grassroots movement, John, to lay the groundwork for transforming the economic and political life of this country.
So, Adam, I know that you have supported Senator Elizabeth Warren's presidential bid, but what do you think Sanders has to do differently during this campaign to consolidate those voters that he is courting?
Yeah, well, first, I want to agree with everything Caitlin said before, and just to add that economic populism is not about left versus right. It's more about new versus old, outside versus inside. And as you said, President Bush campaigned against Wall Street speeches and corporate trade deals and against corruption. He was lying on those things, but he was tapping into something very real, and that's what Bernie Sanders is trying to tap into now. So what does he have to do? He has to make clear that he's not just checking boxes, but leading. And again, my theory is that he and Elizabeth Warren will have the most comprehensive worldview that will project to Democratic voters, oh, if you vote for us, you're not just voting for issues, you're voting for leaders on those issues. And we'll see how he does in a 12 or 20-way primary compared to a 2-way primary. But it's kind of a blessing and a curse for him, right? He doesn't need to get 40% of the vote. He could probably do this with 25%. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. Now, we pulled this clip of Sanders' first presidential announcement from way back in April 30th, 2015. Let's take a listen.
The question is, if you raise the issues that are on the hearts and minds of the American people, if you try to put together a movement which says we have got to stand together as a people and say that this capital, this beautiful capital, our country belonged to all of us and not the billionaire class, that's not raising an issue. That is winning elections. That's where the American people are.
So interesting looking back in time there. And so, Caitlin, looking at that clip, what do you think is behind his desire to run again?
First of all, I love that clip because it's so vintage Bernie Sanders. I mean, he made that announcement outside of the Capitol whilst the Senate was on a break for a little bit. And at the end of it, he said, all right, it's time to go. I got to get back to work. And it just really shows kind of that campaign announcement versus the one today, how incredibly the senator has moved the party without even being a member of it. Remember, he's still not a Democrat. He's a registered independent, and he was just reelected in Vermont as an independent. So it shows kind of the influence that he has had on the party so far, and he's talking about the very same theme. So even though there are these new candidates coming in who are talking about similar things, as you identified, Medicare for All, chief among them, he feels like he is kind of the original purveyor of these policies, and he feels like he needs to finish the job, really, is kind of how his campaign is phrasing it. And he's also thinking, why not me? I introduced a lot of this to the field, so why can't I be the one to run in this wide open race?
He clearly tapped into something that a lot of Americans were feeling but didn't know how to articulate until he articulated it for them. So, Antoine, what are the biggest challenges Sanders faces? Again, we've been talking about how he led the way with the progressive agenda, but is he the influencer but not the closer?
Well, I think the challenges are the same, if not more, this time around than they were in 2016. I worked for Secretary Clinton in the 2016 primary here in South Carolina, and the challenges that he had then are the same ones now. His connection or lack of connection to the African-American community. Here in South Carolina, where we will pick whoever the Democratic nominee will be, 60% the Democratic vote will be African-American, 55% women, with 2 African-Americans running, a record number of women running in the race, a Latino, and whoever else may get into the race. I think he has a math problem in states like South Carolina and going forward. And so I'm not sure what has changed. I'm not even sure the mood of black people, African-American voters, have changed between 2016 and now. And yes, these issues are popular in polls polls, and yes, people are excited about them, but that doesn't always translate that they are excited about maybe a Bernie Sanders type candidate being the person who is the leader of the choir.
Why is it so tough for him to be a coalition builder there, and why has he not been able to reach out to those African American voters who might agree with him on a lot of economic points?
I think part of it is relationships. I think part of it is a track record. And I think part of it is what I've been saying for a very long time. The three things I think that's on the top of voters' minds. Authenticity, genuineness, and honesty. And somehow or another, there's a disconnect between Bernie Sanders and those three things that many voters of color feel. And at the end of the day, people do not want you to show up and think that you're just a fly-by-night type. You have to have a track record and some deep relationships, and some proof that you've been working on these issues for a long time. And I don't think those challenges have gone away for the senator. But in the same vein, I'm not going to count him out. Because, you know, the old Southern lesson says when you count people out, they usually come around and teach you that you don't know how to count. I just think he's going to have a challenge.
All right, Antoine Seawright, Adam Green, and Caitlin Huey Burns, thank you all. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Maryland Governor